Hello and welcome to my hat tutorial. This is the hat that Harry Styles was wearing in one of his recent Instagram posts. For this project, you're gonna need scissors, a hook, a yarn needle, and size 4 yarn. And you're gonna need these yarn colors that were in the photo, or you can do whatever colors you want. It's basically made up of 4 flower granny squares, and those are all sewn together. And then we add a round on top and a frilly ruffle on the bottom edge there. So we're gonna start first with how to make the granny squares. So as I just mentioned, I'm doing the same colors that are in the photo. I think that the color for the middle of the flower is brown, not too sure because there's a filter on it, but I used less than a skein of each color of the brown, white, and yellow. So we're gonna start off here with a magic circle. And what a magic circle is just this funky little knot that we do and then we crochet into it. Anyway, I'll show you what I mean. So you basically lay the yarn over your hand like this, pull the yarn, the long end over like so, it should look like that, and then turn it over, secure these 2 little loops, go in with your hook, and then pull the second one through. Be very delicate with this, it can fall apart pretty easily. So now you have something that looks like this. And now we're going to chain 1 to secure the circle. I will say that something to note is if this is your first ever project, if you're a beginner, it might be helpful to go to another video from another creator that shows you chain, double crochet, and single crochet. It'll just help to have those in your back pocket for this. But the way you chain is you put the yarn over your hook and then pull that yarn through the loop that was already on the hook there. And now you have this circle. It's a bit more sturdy to work with. And we're going to chain another one because we're going to be double crocheting into the magic circle. So this chain 2, which is when you pull the loop through twice, is going to count as a little beginning because the double crochets are taller. So if you didn't do that, it would look funny. So we're gonna start with our double crochets now, which is yarning over, putting the hook through that hole, yarning over again, pulling the yarn through the hole, and this can be a little tricky, so don't be alarmed if it takes a few tries because the magic circles can be tricky to work around. And then you yarn over again, pull through 2 loops, then yarn over again and pull through the last 2 loops that are on the hook. So I'm gonna just do that again. So I'm going to yarn over, go into the hole, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, and pull through 2 loops. So now we've done 2 double crochets. So that's what the double crochet is. And we're going to be doing a total of 12 double crochets into this magic circle. And you don't really have to keep count because you can just count the stitches eventually to make sure that you have 12 stitches on the circle. And something that I do to help keep it secure is you can see I'm pinching kind of the bottom, because if you don't pinch the bottom when you're pulling through these loops, it can be a little finicky. So I pinch the bottom to secure it while I pull through. And that helps me when working in the magic circle because it's not that sturdy of a base. So I hope that helps if you're having some trouble with it. Okay, so I'm gonna count up these little stitches here. Kind of looks like a braid, and each little segment of these 2 little loops is a stitch. So we're gonna make sure we have 12 of those. Just showing you here, that's what I mean by a stitch. And then once we have 12, we're going to pull on that little end from the circle that you were crocheting into and tighten it. And then the circle will tighten like so, and you'll see that first stitch there that you did. We're gonna go in and do a slip stitch, which is just putting the hook through the stitch, then yarning over, and then pulling it through that stitch, and then just through the loop on your hook without any more yarning over. So that's called a slip stitch. So I'm gonna show you again. Go through the first stitch, yarn over, pull through, and pull through the loop on your hook. So you've slit stitched into the beginning, so now we have this round circle here, and you're just going to snip off the yarn, the long end of the yarn, and make sure that there's a little bit of yarn left, that you don't want to snip it too short because we're going to have to weave those ends in later. And you're just going to yarn over and pull through the loop on the hook and just keep pulling until that whole string comes through, and then tighten it, and that's how you fasten off that round. So that's the first round of the granny square. It's just the brown center for the flower. And now we're going to move on to the flower petals. So for that, we're going to switch over to our white yarn. And to join the white yarn, we're going to create a slip knot, which looks like that. And I just put my hook in there and tug it. You can also make it similarly to the way we did the magic circle before. So you just wrap the yarn around the same way and go and pull through, but then instead of keeping it like that, you pull both of the ends down. And you can tug on the short end to tighten it. So we've got a slip knot on our hook here. What we're going to do is we're going to go into any one of these stitches, doesn't matter which, and we're going to go in with the hook, we're going to yarn over and pull through, and then pull through that slip knot that's on the hook there as well. And then you can tug on both sides of the string, the short end and the long end, to tighten it and secure it, and now you've joined your new yarn. So to start, just like last time, we're going to chain 2 because we're going to be doing these double crochet clusters. The petals are made up of what we call double crochet together, which is what I'm going to show you next. So basically we've got our chain 2 over here, and we're going to yarn over, and this is the start of a double crochet, yarn over and go into that same loop that we just joined in, yarn over, pull through. You'll have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, and then don't pull through the last 2. Keep those on the hook. And then we're going to yarn over. We're gonna go into that same stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. You'll have 3 loops on your hook now. And you can see these 3 little clusters, one of which is just that first chain 2 that you did. And you're going to yarn over and then pull through all 3 of those loops. So then you're going to chain 1, and that's your first petal done. Now the first petal is different from the rest of the petals because we started out with that chain 2 that counted as the first little cluster there. So that's just the first one, and then now I'm going to show you how to do all the other 11 of them because there's 12 in total. So you're going to yarn over, you're going to go into the next stitch, you're going to yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, then you're going to yarn over, go back into that same stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Now you have 3 loops on your hook, but we're going to do it one more time because we only have 2 clusters. So one more time, yarn over, go into that stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through 2. Now you have 4 loops on the hook and 3 clusters. So your petal is done, and you're going to yarn over and pull through all 4 loops, and then chain 1. So that's how you do the first cluster, and then that's how you do the second cluster, which is the same as the rest of them. So you're just going to repeat that another 10 times to get these 12 petals around here, and I'm going to meet you back at the end. Okay, so now we've done our 12 clusters. We're going to slip stitch into this chain 1 space. You might be tempted to slip stitch into that first stitch there like we've been doing, and that is fine, but I prefer to go and slip stitch into the chain space right on the other side of that first petal that you did, because I feel like it makes the shape of the petals all a bit more uniform, because otherwise that one can turn out a little more boxy than the rest of them. So here I'm slip stitching into that chain space, and then I'm just going to snip the yarn and fasten off just like we did with the brown part. So just cut that yarn piece off and yarn over and pull through and tighten it. And that's the flower part of the granny square. There'll be all these ends back here and we'll deal with those later, so don't worry about that yet. But for now, this is what it looks like. And we're going to be working for the rest of the granny square into not the stitches on top, but into these spaces where we chained one. So we're not going to be going into any more stitches, we're going to be working into those chain spaces, and that goes for the rest of the granny square. We're not going to work anything into any stitches, we're only going to be using chain 1 or chain 2 spaces, or chain 3 spaces. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Here I'm joining the yellow yarn into one of the chain 1 spaces on our little flower, the same way we did the other colors. And then I'm going to chain 2 to start, and that is actually going to count as a double crochet, as the first double crochet. So I'm going to chain 2, and then in that same space I'm going to do 2 more double crochets. So double crochets were what we were doing for the brown circle. So it's just yarn over, go in, yarn over, pull out, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2. So we're going to do that twice after the chain 2, so that makes 3. And when we come back around the circle, this is going to actually end up being a corner, but for now we're going to leave it like so, and we're going to chain 1, and we're going to be chaining 1 in between all of the segments. So I'm chaining 1, and then I'm going into the next space, that chain 1 space there, with 3 double crochets into that same space. And then I'm going to chain 1, and in the next space I'm going to do 3 more double crochets, and this is going to be one of the sides of the square. And so there's 2 clusters of 3 on the sides, and then we come to a corner. So I'm going to chain 1 after that. It's going to look like this. And now we're going to do a corner. So go into the next chain 1 space with 3 double crochets like you did before. But then instead of chaining 1 after that, we're going to chain 3. So that's just yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, and yarn over, pull through again. So 3 of those. And then go into that same space. Don't move on to the next space. Go into that same space with 3 more double crochets. This is going to make the shape of the corner of the square. So now that you've done that, you're just going to chain 1 and continue going into those spaces and do 2 clusters of 3, and then you'll do another corner. So there's going to be 2 spaces where there's 3 double crochets, and then a corner where there's 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going into the next 2 spaces with my 3 double crochets, and then once this space is done, I am at another corner. So I'm going to chain 1 and then go into the next space with 3 double crochets. Chain 3, and 3 more double crochets in that same space. So now we've got 2 corners down and 2 sides down, and we're just going to repeat that until we get to the beginning. Okay, and now we've reached the end here. I did a corner and then 2 clusters of 3, and now I've come to that first one we've done, and that's going to be a corner. So I'm going to go into that same space that we started in with 3 double crochets. A chain 3 to make that corner. And then I'm going to slip stitch into that first stitch there. And that's going to be the first round of our square all done. So important things to remember is you're going to be chaining 1 between these little clusters, except for the corner when you're chaining 3 and going into the same space. So it should look something like this, and you can see here that's just the first layer. We have 2 more to go, or 1 more to go if you're making a smaller hat. And the reason I say this is that I'm making the hat exactly how it looks in the photo, but Harry has what appears to be a large-sized head for hats. So when you do 3 rounds of yellow, it does end up being a pretty big hat for like a medium to large head. If you want to make it smaller, you should probably just do the 2 rounds of yellow. And then I'll explain how to factor that into the round top part as well later. But if you want to make it like look exactly like his hat in the photo, which is what I was doing, then we're doing 3 rounds of the yellow in total. So to get started on that second round of yellow, we're starting from here. We're going to chain 3 to count as our first double crochet. We're doing 3 instead of 2 because we're going to be kind of crocheting over top of it because it's all the way on the left side here, which isn't what we want. So we're going to go back into the kind of space behind it to do the second part of that corner, which is the 3 double crochets. Once we get all the way back around, just like the first time, we're going to do the chain 3 and connect it in there to make a corner. So we're just doing 1/2 of the corner now. Chain 1 in between every segment, just like before. And then we're going to go into these chain 1 spaces that we did. So don't go into any of these stitches over top, only into these spaces with our 3 double crochets and our corners. So we're going to do 3 double crochets in the next space here, and then we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to do 3 double crochets in the next space, and of course chain 1 after that as well. And we're going to do that 1 more time. So now there are 3 clusters of 3 double crochets on each of the sides, and now we've hit a corner, and we're going to do our 3 double crochet, chain 3, 3 double crochet. And once we're done with the corner, we're going to go around and do this on every side. So we're going to have 3 clusters of 3 double crochet in these chain spaces, and then a corner, and then another side, and then a corner, and then another side, and then I'll meet you back when we're done and we are closing up that first half of the corner that we started with. All right, and here we go into that first corner space we worked into with our 3 double crochets to finish out that corner, and a chain 3, and then a slip stitch into that first stitch there. And now you've done 2 rounds of yellow. So the last round is exactly the same, except instead of 3 side spaces, there will be 4. And then you know exactly where to put the corners because it's where the corners are in the first place. So yeah, nothing changes in the next round from what we just did. So just like before, we're chaining 3 to start, and starting with half a corner, and then chaining 1 between every segment, going all the way around, putting in 3 double crochets in each chain 1 space, and then 3 double crochets, chain 3, and 3 more double crochets in the corner spaces. And then a chain 1 also in between those. So now we've gotten to the end here, and we have our 3 rounds, and we're going to do just like we did before and finish off that corner with 3 double crochets, a chain 3, and a slip stitch. And then you're just going to snip off the extra yarn, leaving some yarn so you can weave. and then we're going to fasten off like we did before, and you've got your square. So we're gonna make 4 of these squares, and then we're going to weave in the ends. I like to weave in the ends as I go because it makes it a little easier when we're doing the assembly of everything if there aren't any ends just hanging around being confusing and annoying. So I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna do that. So you'll see on the back of the squares there's all of these little extra pieces. We're going to get our yarn needle out, and we're going to, I like to start in the middle, so I'm going to start with the brown. It's a bit hard to see the dark color on here, but I'll put the yarn through my needle, and then I'll just take it through a bunch of times through these stitches here, taking care not to push the needle out to the front like this, because then you'll have all these crisscrosses of yarn showing up on the other side. We want to keep the weaving to the back side so that you don't see it in the front. So I'm gonna weave the ends like so, and then once you've done it as much times as you feel comfortable with, snip that off, and then that yarn has disappeared in there, and it helps it to not unravel and everything, because if you just snipped it off where you fastened off, your project's gonna come undone. So we gotta leave these ends and then take care of them after this way. So that's the brown part. Then for the white, I'm just going to do the same thing, put the yarn on the needle and go through a few times through the white part, maybe underneath the yellow a bit, again taking care not to have it show through the front. And then snip that bad boy off. And then for the yellow, I'm mostly going to go through these corner spaces because that's like the chunkiest part that I can use. And I'm just going to go skip one and go through here and then turn back around, skipping one or going through another thing. Because if you just go back and forth through the same hole, then you're not actually doing anything. So you have to make sure you're anchoring it to somewhere. And then do the same thing with the last one, and here you go. I have my finished square now. And so once you've done all 4, you're just going to lay them out side by side like so, and we're going to sew them all together using what is called the mattress stitch. I love this stitch because it kind of looks invisible. So I'm going to grab my yellow yarn, and I'm going to snip off a piece that is about double the length of what I'm going to sew, which is one side of the square. And then once I've done that, I'm just going to thread the yarn through my yarn needle, and we're gonna first of all attach the yarn to the bottom here of the 2 segments that I want to connect, and I'm gonna start on one end and work my way up. So make sure that the back side will look like this. That's gonna be on the other side. We want to make sure that every square is facing the right way up so that it all looks uniform, because there is a big difference from either side. And so I'm going to first of all put my yarn through the bottom section here, and then I'm just going to tie that. We're going to weave in that end anyway, but sometimes when I have the chance to, I like to tie double knot things so that they definitely won't fall out. So that little end will be there to weave in later. And now I have enough length still to go through the whole length of this little seam here. And you're basically going to be going from an upwards direction down every time, and the stitches are going to match up. So like I'm on the first stitch here of the first cluster of 3 double crochets, and so then on the other side I'm going to go also face down into the first stitch from the first cluster. And then I'm going to keep doing that, making sure that these stitches line up and are the same stitch on both sides that I'm sewing at the same time, so that it is all uniform and the shape stays correct. So there I'm going through the second one, and then I'm going to the second one again. See, I'm just going downward from like an upward angle, and then when you pull it, it'll actually kind of disappear and look like these stitches are kind of just attached to each other. But try not to pull it too hard, because that could mess up the shape as well. So it should just be pulled enough so that there's no loose yarn, but not that it's tight. So I'm gonna go along the whole thing like that. See, now I'm on the second cluster for the first stitch, and so then on the other side I'm going in the first stitch of the second cluster, and so on and so forth. until we reach the top and go in through that last corner at the top. Okay, and now we've gotten up here, we're going to be doing our last few stitches, and then once we have finished it off, we're going to pull to tighten. Again, making sure we're not tightening it too much, just making it exactly the right shape so that, you know, you're not pulling and scrunching in the middle there where the seam is. It should just be like a good straight line there. And it might look a little wonky on the top and bottom just because that's the way the granny squares are vibing right now. But once we add the top part and the frill on the bottom, don't worry, it's gonna all look better. So then you're gonna turn it around and you're going to weave in the two little ends from either side of when you started and finished the sewing. And now you can see everything is even out and everything is attached. And we're just gonna do that same thing twice more to connect the other two squares. And then once we've done that, we are going to have this little thing and then we're going to turn it, make sure again it's the right way, and we're going to do that last seam. So once we've sewn them all together, we have like a little circle, and the last step is to create the circle for the top of the hat. And for that, we're going to start again with our magic circle, just like we did for the granny squares, using the yellow yarn, of course. And we're going to be doing 10 double crochets into this magic circle. So just like how before we did 12, this time we're doing 10. And so the double crochet again is a yarn over, go into the hole, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through two, yarn over, pull through the last two. And now we can count here how many stitches we have, and we should have 10. And once we have 10, we're going to tug on that magic circle and create our little circle here by slip stitching into that first stitch. And now what we're going to do is we're going to increase. Increasing is basically doing more than one stitch into a single stitch. So we're going to chain 2 to start, and then we're going to be doing 2 double crochets in each stitch. See here, we're going into one stitch and doing a double crochet, and then going into that same stitch again with another double crochet. And we're going to do that for all the 10 stitches around the circle, which means we're going to end up with 20 stitches at the end of this round. And you're going to see a circle start to form. So again, we're going in with double crochet and another double crochet into that same stitch, then moving on to the next one. There's no chaining in between or anything like that. We're just doing 2 double crochets in a stitch, then 2 double crochets in the next stitch, round and round until we get to the end. And now we're at the end. We are going to do our last 2 double crochets, and then I'm going to slip stitch into the first stitch there. And so now we should have 20 stitches all around the circle, and we're going to continue to increase, but now it gets a little interesting. We're going to chain 2 to start again, but this time we're going to do 1 double crochet into a stitch, and then we're going to do in the next stitch 2 double crochets. So 2 double crochets in here into one stitch, and then in the next stitch we're just going to do 1 double crochet. So it'll go like 1 2 1 2 1 2 all around the circle. So we're only doing an increase, which is the 2 double crochets in one stitch every other stitch. So you can see here we're doing a double, then a single, then a double. And we're going to do that all around the circle. And then when we reach the end, we're going to slip stitch again and chain 2 to start the next round. And so now we should have 30 stitches. So it goes from 10 stitches to 20 stitches to 30 stitches. So it basically increases by 10 every round, and this is going to be consistent throughout the whole thing. So now in the next round, the 4th round, we are going to be increasing on top of every time we did an increase. So now it's going to be 2 normal double crochets and then an increase, and then 2 normal double crochets and then an increase. And then every round after that, it'll increase by 1. So like in the last round we did 1 double crochet, then 2 double crochets, then 1 double crochet, then 2 double crochets. Now we're doing 2 regular double crochets, then the 2 and 1, and doing that over and over. And then in the next one, there will be 3 singular double crochets in between each increase, and in the next round there will be 4 singular ones in between each increase, and so forth. And instead of having to count every time, you're just going to know now that when you see here there's an increase, you're going to do an increase there, and you're going to do your 2 double crochets into the same spot where in the last round you did the 2 double crochets in 1 stitch. See? And then as each round goes on, you will clearly see the increase will stay on that part. So now see, I'm doing 2 singular double crochets, and then the next one is going to be an increase, and you can see from the last round that was where the increase was. So I hope that makes sense. I feel like I'm rambling on and on. So like I said, we're just going to continue with this, going around and around, increasing where we increased in the last round, and we're going to do 8 rounds in total. And so when you're on your 8th round, there should be 80 stitches, and at that point there will be 6 singular double crochets in between every increase. So once we get there, we will not snip off the yarn because we're going to continue working with that yarn to attach it to the circular part of the body of the hat. So I'll meet you there. So if you're doing it with only the 2 rounds of yellow for the squares, then you're actually going to do 6 rounds for the circle instead of 8. And then you'll have 60 stitches to work through the top of the hat, but we're doing 8 and we're going to have 80. So this is what it should look like, and we're going to start attaching it to the top rim of the hat. And so because there are 80 stitches around the circle here, we're going to be doing a slip stitch into each of the stitches up here, not including those chain 1 spaces, and then including this corner space. So 1 and 2 corner spaces, and then there's going to be 18 spaces because there's 6 clusters of 3. So 18 plus the 2 corners on the end makes 20. 20 times 4 is 80, so you should manage to fit that whole circle perfectly that way. And so if it were the smaller squares, it would fit perfectly without the corners, but with a slip stitch into each stitch if it were 6 rounds on the circle. And so we're going to get started on a random corner, and we're going to flip it all inside out and turn the circle bottom side up. So we're doing this inside out so that when we flip it over, it looks good from the other side. So we're just going to slip stitch into, like I said, each corner and then each stitch, but only the back loop here, and then the loop that faces you on the other side from the square as well. So we're not going through the whole stitches, we're just doing the 2 loops that are facing each other on the inside. So that back loop and then that loop that is adjacent to it there. So these stitches have 2 loops, so we're just using one of them. I hope you can see that here on the video. So we're going into those loops only, and we are yarning over and pulling through, and then pulling through that loop that was already on the hook, which is our slip stitch. So we're going to be doing these slip stitches all around the circle until we get to the end, and this is kind of what it'll look like when you turn it back the right way around. Once we get to the end here, we are going to snip off the yarn and fasten off just like we've been doing. And then we are ready to get started on the bottom frills. So we're going to flip it the right way around so that the outside is facing the outside, and this is what it'll look like with the top attached to it. And we're going to first of all find a random corner to start in and attach our yellow yarn just like we've done previously to this bottom part here. And we're going to be doing single crochets along the perimeter, but not into the space, the chain one spaces. We're just going to be going into the actual stitches. The single crochet is just going in, yarn over, pull out, yarn over, pull out from the two that are on the hook. So go in, yarn over, pull out, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And that's going to be the single crochet stitch. So we're going to do that along the bottom there. And when we get to the corners of those granny squares, that's the only time it's going to be a little bit interesting. So we're just going to be doing our single crochets along, and I'll show you what to do once we get there. So here we are at one of these corner spots from where we sewed it together. We're going to be kind of decreasing in these little chain 3 spaces. I'm going to go in, I'm going to yarn over and pull through, and then I'm going to go into the next one, yarn over and pull through, and I'll have 3 loops on my hook, and I'll yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. So I'll just show you again. I go in, I yarn over, I pull through. I have 2 loops on my hook now. And then I go in again to the next little corner space, yarn over, pull through. Now I have 3 loops on my hook, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. And this kind of tugs it tighter together to make it a little more snug and decrease it a bit so that it fits on the head a little better and creates this row of crochet stitches that are easier to work into when we do our little rim that is ruffled. So I'm going to continue going around this whole perimeter with my single crochets and doing my little funky thing at each corner until I get to the start. And this is what it's going to look like now. You can see it looks super straight and nice. And so we're going to get to the end and just go ahead, and instead of doing a little decrease at this corner here where we started, I'm just gonna reach over and slip stitch into that first single crochet that I did. And that's that whole first base of the bottom done, and it'll look like this. And now what we're going to do to create the edge is we're going to do 4 double crochets in each stitch. So you can actually experiment here if you want. I was trying to get it to be as close to the photo as I could, and I found that 4 was the sweet spot, but you can do 3, you can do 5. It'll just change the consistency and the size of the ruffles and the waves of the brim. So I'm doing 4 because I like that the best, but you can experiment and see how you like it, and if you don't like it in other numbers, you can always undo it really quickly. That's the beauty of crochet. And start over. So basically I'm going to do as usual and start by chaining 2, which will count as a little base to our double crochets. That's not going to count as a double crochet this time though, that's just going to count as helping me get up to that height. And then I'm going to go into that first stitch with 4 double crochets into that first 1 stitch. And then along every stitch in that bottom layer, I'm going to do 4 double crochets. And so we're really squeezing them on here. So there's no chaining between or anything like that. We're just going into the next one once we're done with 4 and doing 4 more into the next one, so on and so forth until every stitch along the rim of that hat has 4 double crochets in it. And now we've gotten to the end here and we're doing our 4 double crochets into the last stitch. And once we're done that, we're going to slip stitch into the first stitch we did there. And honestly, you can just leave the rim like this if you want, if that's your vibe. I think it looks okay just having that ruffle like that. But if you want to make it a little longer, more pronounced, we'll do another round by chaining 2 and then just going into every stitch with 1 double crochet. So super simple, just go into the stitch and double crochet along the whole thing. No need to increase or anything like that, just go with another layer on top, and that will just make the ruffles a bit longer and more pronounced, maybe a little wavier. So that's what I did because I think it makes it look closer to the Harry Styles photo. And here I'm just done with that second round and just slip stitching into the beginning, and this is what it looks like after that second round of just double crocheting around the ruffles. And that is it. Now I'm done with my hat, except for the last few ends to weave, so I'm going to snip that off and fasten it, and then I'm gonna have to weave in the middle part here of the hat on the other, this is inside out now, and then this part of the hat, and then I'm gonna have two other ends to weave in at the bottom from when I started and ended the ruffles, and then once I've woven those in, I'm gonna be done, and there's your hat, and you can make it obviously in any color you want. You can adjust it like I've explained to be smaller or have less ruffles. And there you have it. This is the Harry Styles hat, but can be made into any kind of hat you want. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. Follow me on Instagram for more updates on tutorials and patterns, and I'll see you next time.